What's up, everybody? Zach Blomner, Brian Ritchie. This is the Craft Beer Playbook. You're
Craft
watching
Beer Playbook.
episode 2. I know I need to get a different guy to voice over all this stuff. It's just me with like a lower voice.
That's your fake radio voice, right?
It is. So we're excited to keep the season rolling on. And today we've got a really special show ready for you. And that is good because we're going to Swamphead. We're going to Gainesville.
Yeah.
We're getting back to our roots. And as you have seen in our intro video in season 1, many moons ago, that's really where we learned a lot of our tastes, what we like, our first real craft brewery experience in terms of like getting used to that world and making it a point when we're like, hey, do you want to go to the bar? And every once in a while being like, hey, let's go get a craft beer instead. Let's go to Swamphead. Let's just, outside of just going to Midtown and getting plastered and chugging natties for 5 hours.
Just go to Swamphead and get plastered.
In like 1 hour doing with like higher ABV,
Yeah.
So we're excited to chat about that. And, we're also going to dig into some of the beers that they have, some of the things. They're actually doing a special event right now in honor of 420. As everybody knows, it's a holiday for many. They're doing a special Cottonmouth release. Cottonmouth, one of the beers that they've had for a while, but they've done, I think, 3 or 4 different variations of it today at the brewery. So that's a pretty cool thing that they got going on, again, at Swamphead Brewery in Gainesville. And as you see, me and Brian have dressed the part. Well, almost dressed the part. B. I gotta get this little guy.
Oh, there it is. Give us an arc. Give us an arc.
Gator's #1 fan. Art.
Oh my God.
Yeah, man.
Memories there.
So we can talk forever about our time in Gainesville, but we'll try to specifically focus on the beers and what we got rocking in terms of Swamphead. And Brian, just, I guess the first thing we want to talk about is the beers. I got a couple here. I got one that I've had a million times in Big Nose. Remember we used to just point at the nose to the bartender that we didn't have to tell them what it was. They knew.
Oh yeah. They already know.
I'm trying this new one. It's a New England IPA. It's called Moonbeam. So I'm excited to give that a sip, but I'm going to start steady on the Big Nose, brother. What do you got over there? What's out of the cooler?
I'm popping my top as usual here. This is Stump Knocker. So this is the other classic to go along with Big Nose. You can't beat this. Those are the 2 classic IPAs they got there. And I'm going to pull up.
Baby, how you pull up? I'm excited, man. I love me some Swamphead. It's funny. You said you have Stump Knocker, and we always try to figure out how beer and sports mix because it does in so many different ways. And I remember one time I forgot which course it was in Gainesville. I don't think it was Ironwood. I think it was one of the other courses. And I literally had to hit a chip shot. I was off the green. I was kind of in like, the right side. It wasn't like the rough, it was the woods. And there was like a tree that had just
you spend a lot of time there. Although not this weekend. We might get to that here in just a second. You got a little announcement there from the golf game.
I do. So I had to hit a chip shot and there was a stump in front of me and I chipped it and it was super short, like easily could have cleared the stump, but I had an awful shot. So it bounces off the stump and onto the green and close to the pin. And I just scream, Stump Knocker. And,
was that the same time or the different time that you killed a squirrel hitting off
Same hole.
Oh my God.
Same hole. Yes.
I know what stump you're talking about, actually.
I asked you before the show and you were like, I don't remember that.
Well, once you said it was the same hole that you killed a squirrel on, that's that refreshed my memory on the whole.
Remember how that one, then that's one too, where like the left side's all houses. That's a really skinny one, fairway. I think it's a short par 4. It wasn't a par 3. But yeah, man. So we've got all kinds of memories and stuff with Swamphead beer and the different things that we do over there. And we were hoping to talk to Wes Cooper today. We didn't get a chance to chat with him on the program. Unfortunately, they just got too many things going on. But he did, kind of chat with us a bit about what they've been up to, their growth. And, I'll pull up some of the fun facts of the day here when it comes to that. But Brian, just some of your memories from Swamphead, man, and what your thoughts are in terms of the growth and where they started and where they're at.
Well, it's crazy. So Swamphead was founded in 2008, and that was literally the year that I got up there for college. So when you think about that, at least for me, it's mind blowing to think how much growth they've had because, it's funny how time passes so quickly, and you think of it like you do the math. Obviously, we've been out of school for a while now, but to me, it just seems like yesterday when I think about some things, and it's like to think that they literally were founded the year I got up there as a freshman, and now looking at them as like this major brewery that's got so many different I mean, you're finding it in all these different stores, gas stations, different locations everywhere. They're mainstream now. You know, that's a well-known Florida brewery now. And it's just crazy to think that literally they were not even, you know, a few months old by the time I got up there in Gainesville. So it's been a ton of fun. I know while we were up there, or right around the time that we left, they were just moving to a new, bigger location. And that's always that, you know, big step for breweries, going from like the small tasting room and then finally getting the capital to really push that to a bigger. So, you know, that was fun to see. And they have fantastic beer. And I'm going with 2 classics today, but I'm excited to try a lot more of the new stuff.
Yeah, what did we have? Was it the Doug's Twirl? We tried on one of the early episodes of the Craft Beer Playbook. It was, man, I got to go back and look at our Untapped, and I'll do that here in a minute. But we've tried so many different like things that they've come out with. You know, I always tell people one of my favorite beer types is Rausch beers, which are smoked German beers. And they don't make a lot of them at breweries because honestly, there's not a big crowd for them. But but Swamphead did this like smokestack series at one point, and they had one like, again, years ago. And it was probably a top 3 Rausch beer I've ever had. It was phenomenal. It had all that smoky flavor. It was dark. I want to say it was an Imperial too, stout or porter, but it was so tasty. And, you know, that's, I think when it started to open my mind that, wow, they're like really on top of it. They got a lot going on. In terms of what they can create. Another thing too, Brian, in terms of their growth that I thought was really cool. You and I obviously worked in hospitality a lot throughout our lives, and we worked at Outback Steakhouse when we were attending school in Gainesville at UF. And one of the awesome things I thought that Swamphead did, which was brilliant, and I'm sure now it's harder because there's so many breweries out there just in general, but they were, you know, early on in the craft beer scene, at least in Gainesville, they got a keg in a bunch of like restaurants around town. I think we had Stump Nonker on tap in Outback. Yeah. You know, obviously that was, again, when craft beer was still like newer. It was really in its infant stages, again, especially in Gainesville. But to be able to get your a keg in, you know, an Outback, get your keg in like an ale house, and you just start getting these beers out there, then at least you start internally and build out. And then you have people that not only are ordering your beer and trying it at restaurants, but then they're like, okay, I liked that. I should go check that brewery out. It's a nice experience.
Yeah, and especially when you think about all the hoops that you have to jump through to make that happen and hit that growth. And I remember we were talking to our old proprietor, Drew, and he was telling us that when he put that keg on, they still have to go through a distribution company. So even though the brewery's right down the road, that keg has to get shipped somewhere else to like Orlando, wherever the distribution company is, who then sends it back to Gainesville to go to Outback. I mean, it's insane, the laws and the rules behind that, but it just makes it that much harder to get to that level as a small brewery. That's why it's even more incredible to think about that, because like you said, Stump Knocker, I mean, that was like the main thing. It was like one beer, but now they have so many other different types now, and they're just mainstream. They've got a huge event going on today. And it's just cool to see that growth and just think about how young the brewery still technically is.
Yeah, and here's some of the fun facts. I mentioned our guy, Wes Cooper, over there at Swamphead. He is swamped today, ironically. Again, 428. I'm sure that's a big holiday for a lot of brewers, right? Like, I'm sure there's a lot of people celebrating with craft beers and more, if you know what I'm talking about, at different breweries today. But some awesome notes that he sent to us to kind of get us into the spirit here of the Swamphead talk. It's an independently family-owned, one owner, no investors, which is really cool. I mean, for them to still grow without really adding into that realm of things. Founded in 2008, Brian, which is the year we graduated high school. So we got it, like I said, we got it right when it was really starting up there in Gainesville. And they are, let me read some of these other ones. Sustainable brewery with carbon neutral tasting room. I don't know what that means, but I'm sure it's good for the environment.
Science.
The first
science.
The first brewery in Florida to use solar power. There's a fun fact for you. I'm sure that was when they moved to their bigger location now, because they were in the warehouse for a while. In terms of their beers, 4 year-round core beers. We just mentioned a couple in Big Nose and Stump Knocker. 4 quarterly releases, 6 limited releases available each year for distribution, and a ton of beers through their drive-through and tasting room. They only distribute beer in Florida and have no plans of distributing outside the Sunshine State, which is an interesting tidbit, because they're a company that if they wanted to kick it out beyond Florida, they could. I guarantee it. You know, they do enough good beers. But I love what they do. And you know, Wes, He had sent a note at the end of those fun facts. At Swamphead, we have the work hard, play hard mentality. It's our goal to make great beer and enjoy life while doing it. If that ain't Gainesville, baby, I don't know what is.
It's the perfect brewery for the perfect college town, man. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. And they make fantastic beer. Like you said, they could easily branch out to other states. But I think knowing who you are and wanting to be that Florida brewery, I mean, it says it on their can, inherently Floridian. I mean, it's pretty funny that they're sticking to that sort of, vibe and that brand as a brewery, and their beer is just so good. And I wanted to pick up actually my favorite beer that I think that I've had from them so far. And as you know, and as our listeners know, I'm a big IPA guy.
What?
But they have a dark IPA, like a black IPA called Dark Water that I had before. That's just so good. I mean, it's so unique because it's IPA. You get the hoppiness of it, but it's a dark color, and it's just like, I just remember trying that. I think I tried it first at like one of the Brass Taps or World of Beers up there in Gainesville, but it was awesome. And they didn't have it at when I was picking up some brews at Total Wine, but I'm going to be searching for that so I can get a little bit more.
And that's one too, man. I mean, I think in terms of a brewery and how you're doing a good job, it's one thing to have the locals come to you. But when we visit, whether it's for a game, whether it's to see, friends and family up there, we make it a point to kick it over and check out what brews are on tap. Like, that's an easy stop for us. And I think that just speaks to what they've been able to do over that way. The Doug's Twirl, by the way, I brought that up again. It's on our Untapped. If you're not following and friends with us on Untapped, hit us up, the Craft Beer Playbook. You can also follow us on all social media accounts. You're probably watching this on either Facebook or Twitter. If you're on Facebook and Instagram, it's at the Craft Beer Playbook. If you're on Twitter, it's at Beer Playbook. And a reminder, if you're in town or you're visiting, at thecraftbeerplaybook.com, we do something super unique. I know it doesn't sound unique, but I promise you're not going to be able to find another location that does it as well as we do. We have a craft beer map. And basically, you head to that tab, easy to find again, at thecraftbeerplaybook.com, and you can see all the breweries regionalized. So if you're going to St. Pete and you're like, yeah, I could look it up on maps, but that's a hassle. You can go there and you can actually dig through some of the ones that we've put up. And we're always building and expanding that. So if a new place opens, or if you see a place or you like a place that's not on the list, feel free to hit us up and we'll get it added. For sure. But we were talking about the Doug's Twirl in terms of Swamphead. That was one they did different ice cream flavors. So there's a good chance, Brian, I know you had one and I had one separately, just like randomly. There's a good chance we didn't have the same one. I want to say that I had the Rocky Road version. I'm trying to find it on the Untapped. But that just goes to show how much they've branched out, because I think early on it was so much of their IPAs, and they stuck to that. And now they're trying different flavors. I saw it too. They did on May 4th, they did a full Star Wars launch of different types of beers with merchandise.
You nerd out on that one?
What's funny is, like, I didn't know that. Well, even if I knew they were doing it, we're in Tampa, so I don't know if I would have necessarily made it up for that. But when I spent a good like 20 minutes today just looking through all of their different beers that they came out with and all the things they were doing at the time. So that's the types of things you have to do to set yourself apart. I mean, we're talking about an established brewery, an established brand in Gainesville that's not giving up. They're not letting off the gas pedal. They're still trying to do these different things, and the things that really, again, separate and make a beer, brewery unique. So I think it's awesome. And it's, again, it's different when you're like in Tampa Bay. You have a lot more young adults and just, normal adults around here. In Gainesville, you're trying to get that college audience in too. And I think that they've done a good job of that. And, there's other breweries now in Gainesville that have probably benefited from the footprint that Swamphead set down,
Yeah, we talked about that too on some of our other podcasts, how it's not really, obviously they're independent businesses, but it's such a joined community that I think you're absolutely right. Like having a brewery like Gainesville that got started. And we talked to Devin too with Seven Sun about how quickly, it's been like exponential growth. So it's like, Swamphead to me seems like still a very new brewery, but there's been other breweries pop up in Ocala and Gainesville and all those areas, like you said, kind of following on the heels of Swamphead. And that's what a great brewery can do for the whole community, because it gets people interested in, like you said, college town's a different audience, right? Like, most of the time we can relate, back in the day, we're going with what's cheapest, right? We would buy a case of Natty, bring it back for the house party, right? So it's like, you have to find those types of events that are going to bring people out that are willing to sit there and drink a couple beers that are going to be, a little bit more expensive, but, and get into that kind of flavor profile of drinking better quality beer.
100%. And, I think we've both talked about how we've gotten different people into craft beer and spoken about, some of the older generations, they're a little harder to break into it because craft beer didn't exist like it does now 20 years ago, 40 years ago. So I mentioned many times my dad's break-in was Maduro, which I actually had one at the Lightning game last night, but Maduro from Cigar City. So that was his break-in. The next one that he fell in love with was Midnight Oil from Swamp Head.
Oh, where's Daddy-O at? Where's he at?
I used to have to bring him growlers every time I would visit from UF. He'd be like, "Hey, bring." He ended up, and I would a couple times I forgot the growler, so I'd have to buy a new one. But I used to bring him Midnight Oil pretty periodically when I would come home to Tampa from Gainesville. So that just shows, how that growth happens. How something in Tampa is kind of what broke my pops into it, and then Midnight Oil is really kind of, that was his first like, oh, that's one of my beers. That's one of the ones I tell people about now.
So and good, man. I can't wait to open it in a couple seconds.
It is oil, but what's funny? So like. Again, this was in our infancy as craft beer drinkers. I remember thinking that like Midnight Oil was like the thickest, darkest oil type of beer that like I've ever had. And at the time it was. And now you like go through it and you're like, okay, like there's a lot of these out there now. Like that was the only kind that I again, craft beer wise that I would get because we would come down and there wasn't as many breweries in Tampa Bay yet. But I know Cigar City has some darker beers. They obviously have the Marshall Zakharov, who, is their Imperial, very award-winning beer.
I like your accent there on that one.
I had to throw a little Russian on it.
Was that the Mark Zuckerberg beer?
Yeah. I don't know. I'm just flying through things.
I think it's Mikhail Zakharov, I think is how you pronounce that.
Yeah, Sergachev, whatever. There's some kind of Russian involved. But it's a very popular beer. But my thing is like that's a very special beer. And I feel like with those darker beers, most places like they were specialty beers or they were Imperials. Midnight Oil is a core beer. Like that's one that Swamp Head's been pumping out and kicking out forever. And to be able to get that year round, I think really helped them on the dark beer drinker side of things. We talk again about their IPAs a lot, but there's that as well. So I just, it has a special place in our heart. And again, shout out to our guy, Wes Cooper over with Swamp Head, looking to kind of do maybe an event this summer where we actually go up there and kind of come full circle on our craft beer playbook journey.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, it's only 5% ABV, so it's really not even the thickest, darkest of stuff. We've tried way heavier stouts.
But at the time when we first were drinking it, I was like, "Oh, this stuff is rough," and now I'm like, "Oh, that's just a normal like midnight." Like it's just funny how like your taste buds like they
and it goes back to the name too, right? I mean, think about how many times you've been in a brewery and there's a name that catches your eye, and you're like, "All right, Midnight Oil." Like that sounds pretty good. It's a oatmeal coffee stout. Like that sounds delicious. Let me give it a try. So it's like a lot of that is the branding, right? And that we've talked about with some of these other brewery owners that have said what the process is like, trying to create something that's unique and kind of relates to the style of that beer that's going to catch people's attention. That's a big part of it. And I think that when it comes down to the branding thing, it's another reason why Swamp Head's been so successful. The name Swamp Head and the fact that it's inherently Floridian, they're trying to be that go-to quintessential Florida brewery that like focuses on those Florida style beers. I mean, that's awesome. That's knowing who you are and that's pounding that brand until it becomes huge.
Absolutely. So I found my Doug's Dairy Twirl Imperial Rocky Road Stout from Swamp Head on Untapped. And as you know, Brian, you always say like I'm a harsher critic on Untapped than you are. Like I'll throw some threes out there. Like, yeah, you know what? If it's not,
the sympathy threes, those are
I'll throw some threes. So I voted this one, or I ranked it, I guess, a 3.5. Its average ranking is a 4.07.
So you're underselling it.
Apparently, I'm looking at some of these other check-ins. Yeah, I mean, it was good. It was unique. 10.8%. It's an Imperial / double stout. So, yeah, man, it's always fun to go back and like look at those. So again, if you're on Untapped, find us. Brian, before we move on, we're going to get to our friend of the show. It is a Tampa transplant now. Our Fins fan Dan will jump on in a matter of moments for segment 2, Craft Beer Playbook, season 2, episode 2. Since we're talking Swamp Head, we're talking Gainesville. Got to get a little sports in there. So let's just do a quick rundown and just look at some of the different things happening in Gatorland in terms of the sports. And we'll start with the one that's currently going on, and that's Gator Baseball, who, I think if you're talking about power programs, and you're ranking, where the Gators are in terms of that sport and the rest of the country, I think honestly, the Gators baseball program is probably in the best position and probably has been since the basketball and football teams were winning national championships back in the later, 2006s, 7s, 8s.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that we've been really blessed since we've been there, especially at UF, to just have the variety. And I mean, it's obviously we call ourselves the everything school, and I wear that like a badge of honor. I'm proud of that, and I'm cocky as hell because of that, because it literally is. I mean, when we won our first national championship a few years ago, with Alex Faedo pitching, I mean, that was an incredible experience, beating LSU and like literally putting them on the map as far as like a legit, and they already kind of building that.
Yeah, but they were the team that was there and couldn't get the job done. They were like the Capitals before Ovechkin got his first cup, like always around, always a powerhouse, couldn't get the title. And then they did.
And that's the type of team too, because like we talked about this last week with like Mike White. You need the coaching and the recruiting for it to all really come together. And like with Gator baseball, I have full faith in O'Sullivan, Sully, and running that program and the talent that they bring in. I mean, I don't think there's a better, when it comes to pitching talent, just square, pure, raw pitching talent. I don't think there's another program in the country right now that has been recruiting that kind of talent the way the Gators have. You pair that with Sully, who's now proven it. He's obviously won a national championship. He's been to the the World Series many times. I feel so comfortable with where the baseball program is, even though this year it's been a little bit disappointing because they've had a lot of inconsistencies, but it's still a very young team. I still feel like this is a team that you put them into the World Series, you kind of get that going. They're a team that could easily pull it all together and win the whole thing, even this year with some ups and downs.
And it's funny because we talk SEC football so much. I mean, SEC baseball to me is head and shoulders the best baseball conference when it comes to collegiate sports. And I'll go a step further, Brian. For me, what really makes loving Gator baseball easy, outside of the fact that there's a brand new stadium, which you and I have to check out. We haven't been up there, but there's so many MLB players that were at Florida, like in the last 10 years. You can watch, you can turn on an MLB game at any point, from Pete Alonso, who's the home run king, not too long ago with the Mets. We talked about the million pitchers, Mike Zunino with the Rays. I mean, there's Gators on all these baseball major leagues.
Well, look at what Jonathan India is doing right now.
Oh my God.
He's on fire right now. And I actually just found out that I know, so Jonathan India's sister is dating someone that I know, and so it's cool to have that little connection. But he's just lighting on fire. It's fun to see these guys that play well for the Gators, they're studs, and then they get that chance, because the MLB is tough. There's so many guys that are good in college that really kind of fizzle out or just never really even really make it in the major leagues. And Zanino's had a tough career on the offensive side. He's a good defensive catcher, but he hasn't been able to put it together offensively the way he was a great hitter at Florida. So you see how tough it is to make that transition, but to have so many guys, like you said, like Pete Alonso, put Florida on the map. That's awesome. And that definitely helps recruiting.
And still the highest draft pick in Florida Gators history is Mike Zunino. He's still the highest that they've ever had. I think he went third. He was a top 5 guy, if I remember correctly.
They got a chance to beat that with some pitchers, though, coming up. They've gotten close to some of the guys, and Brady Singer out there with the Royals. I mean, they've had some arms come through. AJ Puck. They're going to continue to recruit just some elite pitchers. So
we talked about Mike White a little bit more last week. I'm not going to dive into him as much now. I think we've both kind of made our feelings clear on where we're at with the basketball program and Mike White. And look, he's not on the hot seat per se, probably because of the contract that he's under, but he's got to win over some fans, because I think right now he's trending in a direction where he's losing more Gator fans in the fan base than he's gaining. And it's just not a great trajectory in terms of Mike White right now and this team, who's going to have a lot of turnover coming off of an NCAA, win in the tournament. But they were 2.5 minutes away. And it's crazy. This is why I love March Madness. This is why I love hoops. They're 2.5 minutes away from beating Oral Roberts, being a Sweet 16 team. And we're not even talking Mike White. We're like, well, when he gets to the tournament, he's at least going to make the Sweet 16. It's hard to argue with that. But instead, we're like, well, he collapsed against a dentist school, and it's awful.
Dentist school.
Now he's got a nickname. What do you call him? Mikey Midseed? And
Mikey Midseed. Yeah, I saw that on Twitter. I forget who it was. So if anyone's listening that coined that phrase, I forgot to give you credit. But
he's got his work cut out for him next season. And then I think he's safe, even if they're awful next year. But next year is his really, I think he's on the fence, right? Next year, he can either win a lot of the fan base back and be comfortable, or he can lose even more of the fan base and immediately be on the hot seat in the following season, 2022.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily agree that we would have given him a pass with beating Oral Roberts. I think at that point, when you're playing Oral Roberts, you're
right. If they make the Sweet 16, you can't argue with that. Literally, that makes them a top 16
why can
team
I argue
in the
with that?
country.
Because,
my God.
They were a 7 seed, favored to beat the 10 seed, so that's supposed to be a win.
You know what?
And then
I'm
they
not
were
going to
favored
argue
by
with
7.
you.
No,
It's
I'm just saying.
It's a hypothetical. It's a hypothetical. I argue with you enough about real life. I don't have to argue with you about hypotheticals.
Whatever.
Anyways, they didn't beat Oral. They didn't beat Oral Roberts, so it doesn't matter. The last thing I have for you, and then we'll take a quick commercial break here on the Craft Beer Playbook, episode 2 of season 2. Dan Mullen and the football team, man. You know, they had Kyle Pitts. He's gone. He's going to be a top 10 pick. Maybe in Miami. We'll ask Fins Fan Dan if he likes Kyle Pitts with the Dolphins pick coming up here in a matter of moments. But Kyle Trask also moves on, and I think that's the bigger Kyle potentially in terms of the team and the different look. Emory Jones is going to get the first crack next season. I don't know how to grade Dan Mullen this year. That's the hardest thing for me heading into the offseason and then, you know, once the games actually start in the fall, Brian, because it's a new quarterback, right? A lot of turnover. And Dan Mullen's a guy who has been in striking distance. He's taken a step forward every year. I got to be honest, it's awfully hard for me to believe that Mullen's going to continue to take a step forward, at least next season. I could see it being like a step back year and then praying that they take 2 steps forward, that type of situation. But it's going to be awfully hard to gauge Dan Mullen, even though Emory Jones is his guy. You know, he transferred in because Dan's like, you're the type of quarterback I want. In theory, even though Trask was so good last year and he had Kyle Pitts, in theory, Emory Jones fits the system better, and there really shouldn't be a step back. So I don't know how we're going to grade Mullen this year. Like, what are the expectations? What's fair?
Yeah, for me, honestly, a couple parameters that I kind of have as a fan is I want to see a step forward from the defense because he's obviously shown faith in having Grantham.
Isn't Todd Grantham still there?
That's what I'm saying, right? So you have to.
And you think the defense is going to be better?
I'm saying it needs to be better. What I'm saying is if you have a head coach that puts his name and his stamp of confidence on the defensive coordinator and keeps him after a terrible year that they had last year, then we need to see some improvement. Okay? Yeah, cheers. So
that was for the audience. That wasn't for you.
It was for
You're
me.
talking. So you think even though Dan, you know, losing these guys on I mean, what's encouraging, I guess, about the defense that you think it could be better? Or you're just saying they need to be? Not that you think they will be, you're just saying they need to be.
Yeah, I think you're misunderstanding me. I'm saying that you're asking me how I want to judge Mullen next year. I'm judging him based on if he's putting his faith again in Todd Grantham, who's proven last year and in my opinion the year before to be a guy who lets the team down, especially in critical games. Then if you're putting faith in him and rolling that guy back out there again next year, they need to be better. That's part of my measuring stick for Dan Mullen as a head coach, because it's about the choices that you make for your staff and your assistants. Yeah. So if you're going to put that kind of faith, I need to see a step up next year from the defense. I think that we're going to have some lumps there with Emory Jones. I don't think he's as good of a natural passer as Kyle Trask, although we'll see. Maybe we're pleasantly surprised there. But you're right. In theory, he fits the system better of being that dual threat run-first quarterback that he had with Dak Prescott, Mississippi State. So we'll see what happens. Emory's definitely had plenty of time to learn the offense, so there's no excuse next year for him to be not ready. So there's a lot of unknowns, but I think that those are the main things, how Emory Jones plays and how the defense looks, that I'm going to judge Dan Mullen off next year.
And the one thing I'll say about Dan, this is the last thing we'll end here and move on. He's shown that he can develop quarterbacks. That's why he's at Florida. And he did it with Trask, who obviously was phenomenal last season. So with Emory having all that time to get ready, I don't think it's unfair to say that the expectations will still be high, even though he's stepping into that role. And the other quick tidbit, a lot of teams in the SEC are stepping into a new quarterback or one that they're not sure about in terms of what they did last season. So I think that there's some room to be successful if Dan really has Emory up to snuff. Okay, it's the Craft Beer Playbook, episode 2, season 2. We're going to take a short commercial break. When we return, Tampa transplant, Fins Fan Dan jumps on with us. He's got a lot to talk about in terms of the AL East. You know, what breweries and beers have stuck out to him since he's moved to Tampa Bay. And we'll chat with him a little bit about the Dolphins and the NFL draft. It's like Christmas for Miami fans. We'll do all that.
It is.
Craft Craft Beer Playbook blooper reel.
Oh, I did just watch The Prestige the other day, though.
It's a great one, too.
Yeah.
What a twist.
What a twist. Actually, okay, let me ask you this. Off the record, though. This is nothing to do with it.
So technically, everything's on the record.
Did you like the Prestige better or the other one that had a twist? Yeah, with Edward Norton, because I know that's your guy.
They're both really good. Prestige is better.
You get like Ants came out, or when like Bugs Life, and it's like, why would I go see both of those? Why would I go see two Pixar movies?
Ants was so bad. Ants wasn't Pixar though.
Ants wasn't that bad.
It sucked. Bugs Life at least had other bugs. After 10 minutes of Ants, I was like, we get it. You're Ants. Craft Beer Playbook. This is the Craft Beer Playbook. I'm Zach. That's Brian. That's Brian. I'm Zach.
Regular guys, we love craft beer. We love sports. So,
Belichick or Brady? Who's the guy? I think one of the conversations we have the most about the Lightning is the Steven Stamkos dilemma and how much he contributed to that cup.
Like, does Eli Manning deserve to be in the Hall of Fame? I like that.
Of course you do.
It's their specialty there at Angry Chair.
Magnanimous. I'm wearing the hat right now.
Hidden Springs.
And Brew Roots is another great thing here in Tampa Bay.
Here, let's show off the can here. Coppertail Brewery.
Like, that's interesting. That's tasty. I don't know if I could have a full one, though. Best beer you've ever had?
Oh, I smell it. That's got a good aroma. That thing's strong.
Smacks you. Again, this is the Craft Beer Playbook, Zach and Brian. Make sure you're following us on all social media. Easy to find at the Craft Beer Playbook on both Instagram and Facebook, at Beer Playbook on Twitter, because apparently there's too many characters in the Craft Playbook.
Community. And if you feel you're part of the community who A, loves sports, B, loves craft beer, or both, right? Then this is the spot for you, and we want obviously help growing this.
Cheers.
Cheers.
All right.
We're gonna have no problems drinking these.
We might have to get double beers next time.
I'm ready.
All right. Back in it, back at
Woo!
it.
Let's go.
We're gonna get to our friend of the show segment right now. We're starting with a nice little cheers. By the way, I have switched gears now. I'm drinking Moonbeam. It's a New England IPA from Swamphead. I've never had it. It's a little different. It's not as hoppy as some of their other IPAs that they've kicked out, but it's pretty tasty. We're gonna bring in Tampa transplant. Fan Dan. Dan, I gave you a lot of adjectives in there, man. But as we bring you into the show, well, first of all, thanks for coming out to Bastet. I know you came out to that event when we did the remote, so appreciate you showing up. Appreciate you giving us some time tonight, and just give the audience a little background, man. Obviously, where you're from. Obviously you got your sports teams, and then like what Tampa beer has been like for you so far.
Yeah, for sure. No, I appreciate you guys bringing me on the show. I've been listening. You guys do a great job. I've been listening at the radio station. Obviously, I met Brian first, and I really appreciate you guys bringing me on. Just on that intro, a couple things. One, the only word I heard about that beer you started with was New England, so I'm all the way out on that. That's a complete loss. And then from there, during a commercial break, I think one of your promos that you guys run is Eli Manning a Hall of Famer? Which just keeps jumping at me. I mean, he's absolutely a Hall of Famer. I don't even think there's a question, so we could touch that later.
Interesting.
But to answer your question, no, I am born and raised in New York, just got here. You hit me with the Tampa Bay transplant, very much am. Moved here about 7 months ago. Been here since 7-8 months ago, about September 1st. We moved in, me and my wife, 2 little ones. And just loving the area, jumped onto the craft brew scene. Brian knows I had a little downtime during, I was actually covering the Super Bowl for my job. And, I would have some time between like 1 and 4 o'clock, and I would kind of bounce around to different areas, and really loved the scene. I love jumping around New York, specifically Long Island, Queens, different breweries up there. And I said, you know what, I would love to know what it looks like down there and what the craft brew scene looks like, and it has not disappointed. I mean, truly. Yeah.
What are some of the places that what are some of the things that have stuck out to you? And first of all, what are you drinking? And then from there, what are some of the things that have stuck out to you as far as like breweries you visit or beers that you've tried? Just things that you're like, okay, if my family or friend was coming down from up north, I would probably send them here to try this or this or this. So start with what you're drinking, man, and talk to us about what you found down in here.
For sure. I'm drinking a Free Dive IPA from Coppertail. Love it.
Nice.
Really enjoyed that spot. Cheers. Really enjoyed that. Loved Coppertail. I would say Hidden Springs Ale Works has been my favorite so far. I loved it there. I am not a sour guy, and they got me to be a sour guy. And I thought that was pretty impressive that you can take a non-believer and make them a believer. There's something to be said about that. So I loved Hidden Springs. You mentioned Bastet. I'll tell you, to tie it into New York, Bastet is a place that reminds me the most of New York. It reminds me the most of a New York brewery, what a brewery in New York looks like. I find that in Florida, and specifically this area, breweries are a little more restaurant-esque, a little more with the food, waiters, waitresses. In New York, I mean, they got some real hole in the walls. You might get a pretzel. You might get a pretzel if you're lucky, some peanuts, 3 bar seats. And they make great beer, but it's few and far between to find those types of spots. So Bastet gave me that feel with the kind of wooden set and everything else. Really brought it home for me. And frankly, Bastet had great beers. They had some great, I love their orange. I loved a lot of the things that they were doing over there. So drinking Coppertail now. But really,
and just to jump in here, Dan, because one thing too, obviously, I met you first, and then obviously you met Zac afterwards. But one thing that stood out to me, obviously, when you were down and you had some time off and you were hitting all these breweries up, is, you just had so much knowledge of the craft beer industry. So being from New York and kind of starting there, what got you started on the craft beer scene? Where did your journey there begin?
I don't think I could really point to a specific reason. I think that much like I do now, I spent a lot of weekends like, hey, you wake up, I have 2 small kids, my son, my daughter, and it was like, okay, what are we going to do today? You can only go to so many playgrounds. You can only and it sounds awful, like, oh man, you're bringing your fucking kids to the room. It's like, but it makes for a good outing, right? 12, 1 o'clock, nice weather. You bring them out, they get to run around if the space opens. And that's how it started. As stupid as that may sound, you get together with a couple other friends who have kids the same age and don't want to do the same Chuck E. Cheese thing. And all of a sudden, it's like, hey man, the brewery has a great playground next door. There's kids there all the time. They bring their dog. We all know dogs and puppies are popular at breweries. And so we would do that. And then all of a sudden, I went to 2, 3, and 4, and I was like, this is a fun weekend time. So I brought that to Florida. I brought it to Tampa, and my wife, she really loves jumping around to breweries as well, and that's what we do. That's how it started. That's how I got into it, and as you know, that's the more you go to, the more you learn.
You know what I like to point it out as? I love listening to you explain that because it really it gives me kind of a little epiphany. Basically, breweries are adults' way of continuing their bar and their drinking life that they did when they were younger, without any judgment, without
100%.
Right? It's basically the acceptable version of bar hopping now.
It's a get out of jail free card of being able to do it. See, now in New York, I had to mix in wineries because the East End. For those people listening in New York, they know the East End of Long Island, a lot of famous wineries. So my wife would keep me on a quota, and it would be like, hey, we did a brewery last Saturday. We're going out. So, down here, I'm striking while the iron's hot.
Now, your wife is a Packers fan. You're a Dolphins fan. Yep. And you told me a great story when we were at Bastet. Just give us a little bit about how that dynamic works. Now, fortunately, I would imagine it'd be a lot different if she was a Patriots or Bills fan. It's probably easier with AFC, NFC, but tell us a little bit about that dynamic and how you guys have kind of embraced each other's sports love.
Yeah, for sure. She actually told me, she said, hey, listen, you're doing the podcast tonight. Just let Brian and Zac know that my 2 cents is that Miami stinks.
Noted.
Noted, right? Make sure you remind her of that. But no, my wife is a season ticket holder, diehard Packers fan. Her parents, my in-laws, my mother-in-law and father-in-law, I mean, I'm talking basement painted green and gold, but they're those kind. Bart Starr era Packer fans. And so football was something that kind of drove us together, to be honest. We met in college, and, it was fun to talk about, and we really, really connected on that level. And much like you just said, we went to college in upstate New York. You get a lot of Buffalo Bills fans. the fact that she was a Packers fan to me was, oh, that's really cool. You know,
This is new.
growing up in New York, I was like, oh, Packers fan, all right, you must love Brett Favre, huh? Like that was the knowledge base that you have.
That's how
And
you
so-
intro a conversation with a Packers fan. Like, oh, you love Brett Favre, right?
Right. Yep. So Sundays in our house are very fun. Packers games are usually in a 425 spot. They're usually in a primetime spot. We know Dolphin games are not. So we usually don't have a tough time, you know, kind of divvying up TV time and, getting the ticket and doing those types of things. So, but yeah, just an enormous household of football here.
Now, Dan,
Brian, I know you have Dolphins questions, so
I do.
I'm gonna let you. Yeah, I know you do.
So, Dan, have you had a chance to get down to a game yet in the new stadium since it's been renovated down there in Miami?
I have not. I haven't. So I wanted to, and I had tickets to go to the Miami 49ers game 2016. Colin Kaepernick was lighting the league on fire, and they were coming into town, and it was he was embroiled in controversy, and it was when Kiko Alonso stopped him at the line with Ndamukong Suh. Great game, 38-31. I mean, back and forth, very exciting. And it turns out that my wife got pregnant after buying me the tickets. Why? Because she was pregnant. We had to sell the tickets. So that would have been the game I went to, but we did not make it. And of course, why wouldn't it be I think it was the game of the year in 2007.
That's how it works, right?
Of course, because that's how it works.
But that'll be a fun story for your kid moving forward. Like, hey, I'm glad you're here, but I want you to know what you made me miss back in the early 2000s.
And to tie it in, Dolphins Packers, they play each other once every 4 years, once every 8 years at each place. We went to Dolphins Packers at Lambeau. I firmly believe everyone should visit Lambeau at least once in their life.
Awesome.
Unbelievable place. We found out that my wife was pregnant with second child at Lambeau Field. So the football ties just run
It's tied in, man. That's awesome.
a wild way. Right.
So I gotta ask you. So Dan Marino aside, favorite Dolphins player of all time, and your dream Dolphins pick in the first round of the draft this year.
You mean two picks, Zach? We have 2 picks. All right.
I'm talking about the one that people care about, the early pick. What is it? 6?
We care about all of them in Miami.
I was gonna say you got to define people there, because in Dolphin land, it's not like we're picking 29th. 18 is a big deal.
Oh my God! So we're talking 6, right? Assuming y'all don't trade
It's
for
an
like
18.
the 10th time, because I know y'all are probably going to make 20 more trades before draft night. Favorite Dolphin of all time, Dan Marino's off the board. By the way, Pittsburgh guy, I always bring that up to Brian to remind him that Dan Marino's from Pittsburgh. Sure. But favorite Dolphin ever?
We all know that.
Reminder, Brian, for you. I tweeted at you, didn't answer me. So favorite Dolphin ever, and who your ideal pick is there in the top 10?
Yeah, really hard to take Dan Marino off the board, right? Because wouldn't he be everybody?
It's an easy answer, bro.
It is. You're right. No,
100%.
100%.
Chris Chambers, where's my guy at?
I stick to the wide receiver room. This is going to sound crazy. I loved Devon Bess when I was growing up.
Wow.
Little slot receiver. He played tough. I loved him. I loved Chris Chambers. They were guys I would always.
I'm a big Chris Chambers guy. I'm not a Dolphins fan.
I was a tad young for the Madison Surtain era, but I mean, to the point that I would see them in my video games and I would just go nuts. So I would love Madison and Surtain, but Devon Bess did it for me. And then as I got older into my 20s, I mean, to answer your question specifically, loved Jarvis Landry. Absolutely loved his years here. Wanted him to stick around a little more recently. I always, I will die on this hill. I will say that Rashad Jones was the best safety in the league for a while and didn't get the play he deserved.
Wow.
Best safety in football. Specifically in run support, it was unmatched. And this was at a time when the Legion of Boom was doing what they were doing. It was Earl Thomas this, Cam Chancellor that, and they're great players.
Rashad Jones, you're going to get that reaction from anyone that's not a Dolphins fan, and that's exactly part of your reason.
No, Rashad Jones needs to be spoken about. So Jarvis Landry and Rashad Jones recently, but Devon Bess and Chris Chambers, man, they were my guys growing up.
See, that's how you know you have a true Dolphins fan. When he answers your question with Devon Bess, when you took Dan Marino off the board, you know you got a guy that's a diehard now.
Yeah, I mean, popping over to the draft, things I'm looking for. I I was listening earlier. You said, you want to hear if your boy Kyle Pitts would be a great fit.
So I follow you on Twitter. Brian, whatever reason, is ignoring us on Twitter. But I know that we've been seeing a lot of Pitts tweets out about the Dolphins.
Yeah. I don't fall. I'm in the minority. Let me be clear. But I do not think Kyle Pitts would be the best pick for the Dolphins. Great player. I stopped short of calling him a generational player. I don't think he's a great fit for this room. The same people who are telling me that we're filled with too many slow 6'4", 6'5" bodies, and we need a little more speed with the Will Fuller signing and everything else. Now they want to add Kyle Pitts. I don't think a 12 personnel is going to be best for us. And I don't think Miami's going to be looking at Kyle Pitts. I think that they had the best year in organization history with their tight end room last year. I think Gesicki broke out. For me, my guy's Jamar Chase. I want Jamar Chase at 6. I think he would be the best pick for this team. I will not be upset with Devonta Smith, Jalen Waddle. I do think they're all that good. I think you're looking at it like in Mike Evans, that class when he came out with Julio Jones and those guys.
Oh, yeah.
That level of wide receiver class, I believe it was 2014. You're looking at that type of class again. So if it's Smith, if it's Waddle, but for me, Jamar Chase. And to answer Brian's question, at 18, I would like to go tackle, but if they went and reached for Najee or Travis Etienne at running back, I'm okay.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because I love Pitts, obviously big Gator guy, but I like Gesicki. So it's like I think a lot of the Dolphins situation is because you have and I'm not even a Dolphins fan. I think there's probably a lot of confidence and comfortability with Gesicki right now in the tight end room, and just that whole spot, and knowing that the receiver group is so good that it's like, if we had no tight ends on the roster we believed in, maybe you go Pitts and you can run him out at wide receiver. And again, I think he fits a lot of teams. But I'd like
I think the fear with Gesicki right now is seeing what just happened with Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry, right? In New England, they just got big contracts, a lot of money, a lot of years, production that maybe didn't warrant it. And I think that Gesicki is going to exceed that. So a lot of people are looking at, hey, you draft Kyle Pitts now at 6, you can let Gesicki walk at the end of the year, and you never lost that talent base. I'm not saying I do not agree with that, but I think that's the thought process.
But if Jamar Chase or let's say the Fins take a receiver, if that guy pops in year 1, I don't think anybody gives a damn about what happens to the tight end position. Like, you can figure that out if the receiver pops.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I think Chase is the perfect receiver for this team. I think that he fits like a glove. I think that too many people talk about Tua, and you got to play to Tua's strengths, and you got to make a fit to Tua. Guess what? If you can't make it work with Jamar Chase, we're moving on. Where were you
at? And I've talked to Brian so much about the Dolphins. It's interesting to talk to a different Dolphins fan. Where were you at when the Watson rumor popped about Tua potentially going to Houston? Where were you at on that? Obviously, it's off the table now. Watson's, maybe heading towards a different kind of uniform that's not NFL related.
Yeah.
But in terms of that rumor when it popped up like a month and a half ago, what'd you think?
Yeah, I was all for it. I was all the way in. And let me be clear. I don't want that to sound like it means I'm anti-Tua, because I'm not. I think he's going to be a star.
Even though Dolphins Twitter will tell you that you have to be one or the other. Even though
of course, because you're not allowed to believe. Well, and also Twitter doesn't allow for it. But I think I was all in on Deshaun. I was ready to move mountains to make it happen. And I think you need to be ready to move mountains to make it happen, because we do have a top 5 defense in the NFL. We do have a team that's ready to win now. You always hear, well, they're not one or two players away. They need 3 more years. We're the epitome of 1 or 2 players away. The defense is in place. Flores has them running. You need offensive pieces. Watson makes that go. So I was all the way in on it. I was, obviously pre-allegations. I was ready to move mountains for him, send the picks, send the players, and, get running with Mahomes.
Yeah, and I like Tua. Like, I'll clarify. I like to rib Brian on it a lot because it's a sensitive subject. But I like Tua. I think he's gonna be okay. I hate the fact that there's so many comparisons to Herbert because I'm like, both guys can be good. Like, I don't know why we have to pick which guy was the right pick. They're both.
Nobody wants to hear that, Zach. We live in a world where it's one or the other, and now it's Miami blew it by not taking Herbert because he blew.
Well,
up
that's
in
the
LA.
thing too. We live in such a fantasy football driven world now. I mean, talking about they're in two different situations. Chargers fans made the defense of Herbert of his losses because they're like, well, our defense sucks. Well, you could also use the same argument for Tua to say that's why he didn't have as many passing attempts. So he didn't have as many passing yards because he had a better defense. He didn't have to do as much to try to drive the offense. Right. Now, granted, looking on a 1-year sample, I was dead wrong on Herbert because I was totally against him coming out of the draft. Dan, I know that you liked him obviously more.
I was going to say, I'm going to step in and say I got you there.
Yeah, no, that was one of your hits for sure. But, I look at it and say, okay, people don't usually look at a lot of context anymore. It's just like, okay, well, Tua threw for 100 yards this game. Herbert threw for 300. Tua's team won by 30 points, but Herbert lost, but Herbert was the better quarterback, right? So it's like it's too much stats driven where you got to look at the situation, okay? When the Dolphins asked Tua
to you bring up Chan Gailey right now, I'm going to lose it because I've heard nothing but Brian
when they asked
about
Tua
Chan Gailey for like 5 months.
It's a false narrative. They want to kill Chan Gailey because this is where I'm going to go a little.
That's Brian. Brian's the Chan Gailey killer.
Listen, Zach, there's a lot of people who feel the way Brian does.
Oh my God.
Gailey had one playbook for Fitz and another with Tua. And
He's admitted that.
Oh, come on.
Dan, he's admitted it himself that he calls different plays for Fitz. So when you're getting that from the guy, how can you argue that?
I think he's alluded to that. I was sort of saying that because if we want to talk in absolutes here, and this is also unfair, I also think Chan Gailey would tell you, hey, I gave Tua the opportunity to rip it, and he didn't do it. So
that's fair.
But
how many
goes both ways.
We're weighing the opportunities of that Fitz had to rip it versus the opportunities that Tua had.
Then you're a 17-year QB who knows the offense. Of course, you're going to be more comfortable with it. Of course, you're going to be able to do this, that, and other thing. But at some point, the eye test matters.
Would you agree, though, that
2 games that Tua got benched, he couldn't cross the 50 against Denver.
Yep.
That's not good.
Okay.
Denver without Von Miller, by the way.
Dan, wouldn't you agree, Dan, though, that the fact that they've let Gailey go now, that they're admitting that if they want to see the true development of Tua, that they have to deal with someone else that's going to give him a full playbook? Would you agree that that's partly of the decision to let Gailey go?
Not necessarily. I think Gailey went for the reasons that we heard. I think he's 71 years old. I think he didn't love this COVID season with the travel and the things that it brought, and I think he just didn't enjoy it the way he thought he was gonna.
I don't know.
If nothing else, we can all say that Chan Gailey is that RPO concept, a little ahead of his time. Really likes to work with those quarterbacks who have Tua's strengths. Brian Flores wouldn't have brought him in pre-draft if that wasn't the case. They didn't try to put a round peg in a square hole. So I love that Godsey and Studsville are taking over. I believe in Tua, and I absolutely think he's going to jump in year 2 with an offseason and workouts and everything else. But the idea that Tua Tagovailoa did not struggle a little bit, it's lunacy to me. He did.
Look, you're not gonna get an argument from me. It's just it's such a polarizing conversation. And look, coming from somebody who's covered the Bucs through Jameis Winston to Tom Brady, I can tell you in terms of fan base and conversation, a polarizing quarterback is the best thing in the world. Whether you love him or hate him, you can bring it up at any point in the day, any day in the week, any week in a month in a year, and people are just gonna have a million opinions. And
I think Tua puts much of the things that I just said. Many of the negative opinions, and again, let me be clear, I'm not down on him. I just think he's time. I think he puts it to rest in year 2. I think he's a huge jump, and by this time next year, nobody's talking about the quarterback situation in Miami. We got our guy.
Let me throw this at you guys, and I want to pivot to baseball as we wrap things up here. Again, talking to a Tampa Bay transplant from New York, Fan Dan, the Craft Beer Playbook, Episode 2, Season 2. Zach Blobner, Brian Ritchie, holding it on down. Appreciate everybody for listening and commenting. We'll see you. But Dan, I wanted to ask you in terms of Tua, Bama quarterback. Obviously, Mac Jones, somehow his stock has skyrocketed. Is there any guess that like Mac could be a better pro prospect than Tua? Because I feel like a lot of people are putting him potentially in that top 5, which would be ahead of, where Tua eventually went, I think, right?
Yeah.
Considering. So I just think it's interesting that Mac's getting all this love. And I would even argue that he's lucky Tua went the year before, or the Bama narrative in terms of quarterbacks would weigh heavier. He's lucky Tua went the year before.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually think you make a great point there. I think he is lucky to win. I think that's huge for him. And, I don't mean to draw parallels, but much like I love Josh Allen years ago, and me and Brian have gone, 15 rounds on him. And, I love Justin Herbert. I think I really like Mac Jones. I think he's a little unfairly criticized in this current climate with – who I believe is a better quarterback than Justin Fields, by the way. I think Fields should go ahead of him. To answer your question, if you look at both quarterbacks at Alabama, if you think that Mac should be above Tua, then you got to get your eyes checked. I mean, Mac Jones is not the prospect Tua was. He does not have the talent Tua did. I don't, frankly, even think it's close. I think Mac Jones is going to be a starting quarterback in this league. I've read crazy stuff on Twitter that he's going to flame out, and he had so much time behind the Alabama line, and a lot of it. He's going to be a player, but he will not be above Tua. He will not be better than Tua, and I don't think he'll be better than Justin Fields. I think San Francisco's looking at Fields at 3. I think it's a smokescreen for Mac. Yeah. He's a good player. He's a good good quarterback, and he makes great decisions. And dare I say, he bears a resemblance to a transplant Tampa Bay Buccaneers quarterback. But I think that's going ceiling, and people like to jump.
Okay, so we'll pivot here. We'll wrap things up talking a little baseball with you. And obviously on this podcast right now, we got Rays, we got Orioles, we got Yankees. We got 3/5 of the AL East. And look, man, I'm not going to sit here and pivot and go back and forth with you about Rays and Yankees. We have enough conversation on Twitter about it. Are the Yankees issues real? Because clearly they've had an awful start. They just got swept by the Rays. They're not slugging. Again, it's easy for me to pour on them, but you're a fan, you're watching, and I know you've even bitched about the hitting on Twitter outside of the Rays games. So what's your take on the Yankees complexion? And by the way, they were like hands down the AL favorites for the second year in a row to really, be that stellar team. And the Dodgers are holding up their end on the West Coast. They're fucking killing it. But in terms of the Yankees, what's your diagnosis of them right now?
Sound the alarms. It's absolutely that real. It is real. Their issues are real. It is not something that is going to be an easy fix. It's not easy for me to say that because I am a diehard Yankee fan. Been a season ticket holder. Like I have best friends.
What is it though? Like what? Like what's killing them right now? Like what is it that's making them
a home run? They built a home run or strikeout team in an era where that is not going to get it done. And they have the sluggers. And I mean, I don't have to tell you. You can put it together. Judge, Stanton, Hicks, Sanchez. They stink. They stink. They're bad. They're not good. I am not your run-of-the-mill Yankee fan that thinks things are going to turn around, et cetera, et cetera. They're bad. It is what it is, okay? And when you fill your roster with 270 hitters and rely on DJ and Urshela to carry you, we thought Glaber would be a roughly 290 to 300 hitter. He has been lost, okay? Sound the alarms. It's actually that bad. This is not hey, everyone, this is not an Aaron Rodgers level. Everyone relax. 162 game season, only 15 games in, but we're in trouble. We're in trouble because guess what? The pitching ain't great either, okay? Garrett Cole will bring it every night. On his off night the other night against the Rays, I think he went six and a third, to earn. I mean, Cole is a beast. I would follow that man to hell. But if your name is not DJ LeMahieu or Gio Urshela, guess what? See ya. I am so fed up with the Yankees. They are trash right now.
Zach, the one thing you're noticing, I know right now, is that no one's going to ever confuse Dan with a jaded fan. That man can put down some realistic, some frustrations. He's always going to be critical of him, but I respect that. I respect that as a fan. I mean, you don't get lost in the sauce.
Sure. And I'll say this, Dan, man, I don't think we can outdo that. I think that's a good place to end with you because I love hearing just you talk about how bad the Yankees are. That puts a good smile on my face. Hey, man, no, seriously, we appreciate you, brother. Obviously, we'll see you for a brew in person sooner rather than later. I'll see you on Twitter. Brian won't because he's still in Twitter jail. But, hey, man, I appreciate it. Brian does as well. Thank you for joining us tonight, brother, and looking forward to chatting and drinking with you a little bit more soon, bro.
Absolutely,
Cheers.
guys. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
There you go. Tampa transplant from New York. Our guy, Fins Fan Dan, joining the program here. Brian, that was a fun show, man. Look, we're up over an hour now. We're still good. We're drinking through. Shout out to our guy, Wes Cooper at Swamphead Brewery for obviously chatting with us pre-show and kind of giving us some like notes and things that are happening with Swamphead. Really enjoyed our conversation with him. And then, as I mentioned, Fins Fan Dan, your guy there for hopping on with us a little bit and chit chat. And we got a lot more on the way for you. We're going to get back to some of the Tampa Bay breweries next week. I believe we're looking Florida Avenue, Big Top, going to reach out to them and see if we can get in contact. And we're definitely going to drink some brews. But Brian, the one thing I'll say real quick before we bounce, we just talked about the Yankees and their situation. It appears the Orioles have come back down to earth a little bit from that hot start.
Yeah, I mean, look, you as long as well as Fangraphs gave them a 0.0% chance of making the playoffs. So, listen, like I said, starting the season, I wanted to see this team just take a step forward, especially with the young players. They've been disappointing, obviously, and they've been inconsistent. I mean, they'll have games where they lose 13-9, and it's like, okay, well, our pitching sucks, and then they lose the next night 1-0. So it's like it's hard to pinpoint exactly. They just have a lot of roster holes. But like I said, I'm looking more towards the end of this year and next year when they start to finally, because they've had a bad farm system for a while. I'm looking for the Orioles to finally start to bring some of these young guys up that they've started to build and obviously pick with some of their high picks. So it's all about the future, similar to how the Rays always build things through the draft, developing guys. So, again, for me, it's not about how the record is this year. I want to see how the young guys play and continue to develop.
Absolutely. All right. We'll see you guys on episode 3. Next week, again, Craft Beer Playbook. We're in season 2. We do this show every Tuesday night live at 6:00. Everybody that watched, thank you. Again, shout out to our guests today and the people that helped put this program together. Brian, cheers, man.
Cheers, brother. I'm empty. I'm going to go grab another one. Cheers.
Woo, attaboy. All right, we'll see y'all soon.